Okay, Rebbitzin Yocheved Goldberg is the Rebbitzin of Boca Raton Synagogue, Shul, a vibrant and growing congregation with over 1,000 families. She's a sought-after speaker dealing with interpersonal and family matters. It is such an honor for us to introduce Rebbitzin Goldberg. Sorry for all the papers. I just had to psukim and take it away. I'm sorry. Get it out of your way.
Thank you. First of all, welcome to sunny Florida. I'm sure you don't mind being here so much, and even if things happen with your flights, I'm sure you won't mind being stuck here so much. So happy to host you in Boca if that happens, and just enjoy your stay and the beautiful weather. I was thinking as I looked around this room before, how if Mashiach will come, he'll come first to this room, because the diversity and the unity that is taking place here at this conference is just so beautiful to see, and it's really warming my heart, and I really love that aspect of this organization, that it's not just focused on one hashkafa, one type of school, one community, but it brings everyone together from all over, and that's really, really special for me to see. I've heard about it, but now I get to see it in person, so yasher koach to the organizers, and this is really, really special. I'm honestly very honored and very humbled to have been asked to speak to you today. You're such a prestigious group of women, and you're so impressive, and you do so much. I'm in awe of all of you for your mesiras nefesh and your dedication to our schools. I want to thank Amatz for all that you do, for our principals, and as a result, for our Benos Torah. I know you know and practice so much of what I'm going to speak about, but I think it's always good to review and get chizuk in our roles. I normally don't read off paper, but there was a message that I so badly want to speak about that I hope you indulge me as I do a little more reading inside, because I just wanted to say the right words. Recently, a Rebbe who loves and is very beloved to his Talmidim visited our community and shared a story that has stayed with me since. He told us how a well-known speaker once boasted to him, "Last year I traveled and spoke to almost 2,000 young people." The visiting Rebbe said to him, "That doesn't impress me." He said if he would have told me that he listened to 2,000 teenagers last year, now that would have impressed me. Because it's easy to talk, but it's much harder to listen. Talking places us at the center, but listening places someone else at the center. Talking allows us to deliver a message, but listening allows us to understand a person, their story, their struggles, and their hopes and dreams. And that difference between speaking and truly listening lies at the heart of one of the most foundational declarations in Jewish history. Just 2 Shabbosim ago, we read Parshas Yisro, and in it we read about the moment when Klal Yisrael stood at Har Sinai and declared, "Naseh v'nishma," we will do and we will listen. At first glance, it seems backwards. Normally, we would expect understanding to come first and action to follow. But the Torah is teaching us something profound about leadership, education, and relationships. Naseh and Nishma are not simply 2 steps in a process. They represent 2 different ways of engaging. How we engage with Torah, with people, and with responsibility. Naseh means we act. We fulfill obligations, we show up, we take responsibility, we build systems, we uphold standards, we ensure that what must be done gets done. As educators and school leaders, Naseh is your daily reality. And of course, Naseh comes first. It is the foundation, the starting point. Teaching, transmitting, communicating, inspiring are the core of our mission. You need to write curriculums. You train educators. You create structure. You ensure accountability. You maintain expectations, and you protect standards. You carry enormous responsibility, often unseen, often unacknowledged, and often under tremendous pressure. Without Naseh, schools cannot function. Without it, there's no continuity, no stability, and no real and effective transmission of Torah. But Naseh alone is not enough, because Torah is not only about doing, it's about hearing. It's about the second word the Jewish people said at Har Sinai. It's about nishma. Nishma means we take a step back. We listen deeply. We seek to understand what lies beneath the surface. The word nishma reminds me of the word neshama. It's what's going on the inside, the deeper look, the deeper listening. It's when we find and cultivate the inner beauty that can sometimes be hidden from view. I want to share a beautiful quote from the hesped Rav Yosef Dov Soloveitchik Zatzal gave for his mother, the Tolna Rebbitzin, expressing this idea in a deeply personal way. He wrote, "What is Torah Simecha? I cannot define precisely the Masoretic role of the Jewish mother. I only know what it expresses itself in a living experience. I used to watch her rearranging the house in honor of a yantiv. I used to see her recite her tefillos. I used to hear her chant the weekly Parsha on Friday night. She told me that Judaism expresses itself not only in formal compliance with the law, but also in a living experience. She taught me that there is a flavor, a scent, and a warmth to mitzvos. Without her, Judaism would have been cold, dry, and lifeless. In his words, the Rav was teaching that Torah is transmitted in two ways. There is the Torah of Nasa, what we teach explicitly, what we structure, what we require. But then there is the Torah of Nishma, what is absorbed through looking deeper, spreading warmth, and creating an atmosphere of belonging. Rav Soloveitchik's father taught him the Musar Avicha, how to perform mitzvos, the Naaseh. But it was the Torah Simecha that provided the Nishma, the Neshama, how the mitzvos transform us, what they're about, how we should experience them, and why they matter. Our schools must provide both. Structure without warmth produces compliance without connection. Warmth without structure produces feeling without continuity. But when Nasa and Nishma come together, Torah becomes alive, and so do our children. Over the past 25 years as a Rebbetzin of the Boca Raton Synagogue, a very large and diverse community, Baruch Hashem, I've seen just how transformative this is. I've sat with families from every background, every walk of life, every personality type. And I can tell you, when we take the time to really see the person and to really hear their story, real growth happens. I've learned that what you see on the outside, a shy teenager, a quiet and reserved adult, often hides tremendous strength, insight, and potential. And it's your job as educators and principals, and my job as a Rebbetzin and a community leader, to notice, to honor, and to try our hardest to draw it out. That is what Nishma means. And when we practice the Nishma, they are more likely to embrace our Naaseh. When we listen, they feel seen, heard, and understood. And as a result, they're more open to what we are inspiring them to do. I want to share with you several ways I think we can make sure we are focusing on Nishma and not only on the Naaseh. First, Nishma means listening to the individual student. Every child sitting in your classroom carries an entire world inside of them. Pressures we cannot see, fears they cannot articulate, questions they're afraid to ask, and dreams they barely understand themselves. Sometimes what looks like disengagement is actually overwhelm. What often looks like defiance is really pain. And sometimes what could look like indifference is simply a child who does not feel seen. To practice Nishma means to ask, who is the student beyond her report card? What story is she carrying? What does she need? Not only academically, but emotionally and spiritually. Listening in this way is not passive. It is one of the most demanding forms of leadership because it requires humility and it requires patience. It requires the courage to admit that we do not always know what is really happening beneath the surface and to try our best to find that spark in each and every child, whether they know they have it or not. Do we know what motivates them? Which child's artistic? Which one's musical? Which one's athletic? Who comes from a loving home? And who's from a home in which they don't receive much love and affection? We have so much curriculum to cover, so much to memorize and to be tested on, so much naaseh. But do we make time and save some energy for the nishma? Over the years, I've seen children bloom when someone truly notices who they are beyond the surface, their creativity, their resilience, their kindness, even when it's hidden under shyness or struggle or Rahman al-Islam rebellion. I want to share something personal that has stayed with me throughout my life. When I was in middle school, I'd already been struggling academically for years. I got terrible grades, was sent out of class more times than I'd like to admit. Needless to say, I wasn't the strongest student in the class. I was basically the class clown. My behavior frustrated my teachers, my principals, my parents, and I wasn't too proud of it either. But it was a real struggle for me to get my act together. In 7th grade, I had a teacher named Maura Fine. She was the first teacher who truly saw me. She noticed not only what appeared on my report card and in the classroom, but something deeper, a potential that I did not even know yet or see within myself. That year, when it came time to choose a field day captain, big deal, schools typically selected the most accomplished students, the confident ones, the A students, the high achievers, the girls who already stood out as leaders. But this teacher believed that leadership is not only about recognizing those who are already shining, sometimes it's about helping someone discover their light. She went to the administration and suggested something that was not at all typical, to choose me to be the field day captain. To their great credit, the school leaders listened. They trusted Maura Fine's insight. They were willing to support a decision that went against the usual expectations because they understood that education is not only about rewarding achievement, it's about nurturing potential. I still remember how surprised I felt. Honestly, I could not understand why she believed I was capable of carrying that responsibility. From my perspective, there were so many other girls who seemed so far more obvious choices. but she believed in me before I believed in myself. And that experience changed something inside of me. For the first time, I felt seen, not for where I was struggling or falling short, but for what I could become. Being entrusted with leadership at such a vulnerable stage in my life gave me a sense of confidence and purpose that I had never felt before. That was the year everything shifted. After that experience, I began to approach my studies differently. I worked harder, I pushed myself more, and slowly I began to thrive. My team also won field day. Looking back now, I realize it wasn't the title of field day captain that transformed me. It was the message behind it. It was the knowledge that someone had taken the time to truly see me, not just my challenges, but my talents, my creativity, my spirit, and my potential. That was the moment I began to see myself differently, to recognize my own strengths and capabilities, the endless possibilities that lay ahead of me. I have never forgotten that teacher, and I have never forgotten that the school leadership supported her vision, because it took courage on everyone's part to believe in a student who did not yet believe in herself. And that, in many ways, is the essence of Nishma. It's the ability to look beyond what is immediately visible and to see the spark inside each student, sometimes long before she sees it in herself. Because when a child truly feels seen, truly believed in, truly understood, that is when she finds the strength to try and to succeed. But Nishma extends beyond the student alone. It also means listening to parents, your partners in this sacred work. Every parent who sends a daughter into your school is entrusting you with something infinitely precious. Along with that trust comes hope, anxiety, expectations, and many sleepless nights. When schools truly listen to parents, not defensively, not reactively, but with deep and sincere empathy, something powerful happens. There's no one who knows their child better than parents. They have a lot of insight and experience they can bring to the table to help the school understand and appreciate their child. There's no greater stakeholder than the parents. They are imperfect and may not always be aligned, and at sometimes you may disagree with their opinions and approach. But on the whole, they need to be respected, honored, and invited to partner. When the parent-school partnership and relationship is nurtured, trust in the school strengthens. And then we see children thrive because they are supported by a united circle of people around them who care. The same is true for understanding the homes from which students come from. Some come from stability and calm. Others carry heavy burdens, emotional, financial, or family struggles that we may never fully see. When a child walks into your school, she does not leave her life at the door. She brings all of it with her. To listen means to remember that behavior often reflects circumstances, not character. We need to put ourselves in their shoes, empathize with their struggles at home, and give them sensitivity and understanding that they need from their school. Throughout my time as Rebbitzin in my diverse community, I've had the privilege of sitting with families from every background, every personality, every level of observance, and every life circumstance. And I've learned that each person carries a whole world inside of them, a story, a history, a set of values, and often struggles that are invisible from the outside. And I've seen again and again how transformative it is when someone truly takes the time to listen, not only to what is being said, but from where it is coming from. And that brings us to the broader community context. Each of your schools serves families living within unique communities, each with its own rhythms, challenges, values, and realities. To practice Nishma means to understand those contexts. It means recognizing that schools are not islands. They are part of living, breathing, extended communities that have their own unique flavors, customs, and cultures. And when we do not pause to listen to that context, when we do not take the time to understand where our student is coming from, even the best intentions can lead to unintended pain. There's another story that has stayed with me for many years, one that deeply troubled me at the time and continues to shape how I think about Nishma in the context of understanding a student's community. It involved a young woman from a diverse community who was attending a Beis Yaakov high school. I know that a part of the frum world isn't Gores Yom HaShoah and doesn't recognize it. And of course, that's fine. However, this girl's community, particularly at a time when there were many survivors alive in it, recognized Yom HaShoah with deep seriousness. Survivors still lived among them, and the community worked hard to ensure their voices were heard and their stories were honored. That particular year, a Holocaust survivor from the community was scheduled to speak at a local program on Yom HaShoah. He was not just a distant figure. He was someone the girl's family knew personally, someone they had hosted in their home for Shabbos meals, someone they felt a deep responsibility to support and honor. For that family, attending that program was not optional. It was a sacred obligation, a way of saying, we see you, we remember, and we will carry your story forward. But that same day, the girl came home from school visibly upset. She told her parents she would not be able to attend the community program that evening. Why? Because that day, her school had chosen to break out Color War, the most exciting, energetic, and joyful event of the year. And once Color War began, she was expected to devote all of her time and energy to preparing with her team. Her parents were stunned. They could not understand how a school devoted to Jewish education, could schedule its most festive and spirited program on a day that for many frum communities was marked with solemn reflection of the horrors of the Holocaust, even if they don't observe the day. The parents had no issue with the school not having a Yom HaShoah program, but Color War breakout dafka on that day. Did they not look at the calendar and see what else is happening in the Jewish world at that time? Are they so disconnected to the width and breadth of the Jewish people to miss that scheduling conflict? For this family, it felt like the school did not fully understand where their daughter was coming from, the values of her home, the rhythm of her community, the emotional weight that day carried for many Jews around the world, but specifically for their community, which was well represented in that school. What struck me most was not the decision itself, but what it represented. It reflected a missing layer of nishma, because as the school paused to listen, to consider the diversity within its student body, to recognize that different communities carry different lived experiences and sensitivities, perhaps they might have handled this differently from the start, known how to properly schedule their school calendar, or at the very least, acknowledge the complexity for those students affected. NASA asked us to build strong programs, vibrant school cultures, and meaningful experiences for our students. But Nishma reminds us to ask, how will this be experienced by every child? What does this day mean in the homes of where our students come from? What values are they carrying with them when they walk through our doors each morning? We don't have to incorporate everything anyone and everyone does in their community, but we should be aware of it and be sensitive to it. Because when we truly listen, not only to the individual student, but to the community that shapes her, we send a powerful message that our students do not need to leave part of themselves at the doors of their schools. That their history, their family stories, their community's values all have a place within the educational environment that we create. And that's what allows a student to feel whole, to feel that who she is and where she comes from are fully seen and respected. This is a delicate balance that we hold as educators and leaders. Not say yes, we must have standards, we must uphold values, we must provide clear explanations and strong structure. All of that is essential. But Nishma asks us to take a step back and ask deeper questions. Who is this child? What world does she walk between every day? What are the norms of the home she returns to each afternoon? What's the community like that is shaping her identity? Because when we truly listen, not only to words, but to context, we make more informed decisions. And we create schools where students and their parents feel seen, where they feel understood, and where they feel like they belong. And then they can truly thrive. There's yet another dimension of Nishma, one that reaches beyond the individual child, beyond the family, and even beyond the immediate community. It's the ability to listen to history itself and see ourselves and our place in it. Our students in our school don't exist in a vacuum. They and we are on a continuum of Jewish history and charged with Jewish destiny. To see our students not only as young people sitting in our classrooms today, but as part of a far larger picture, a 3,000-year-old story that continues to unfold through them. Knowing where we come from and feeling responsible for where we are going is not only enriching, it is empowering. This past summer, I had the opportunity to fulfill a lifelong dream. I traveled to visit my grandparents' hometown, a small town called Bushdina. When my grandparents lived there, it was part of Hungary. Today, it lies within the borders of Ukraine. I had always been deeply connected to my grandparents. Their life stories shaped me in profound ways. They had grown up surrounded by loving families, vibrant Jewish life, and close-knit community. They married, built homes, and began raising children, only to lose everything during the Holocaust. They were first cousins who, after the war, miraculously found each other again. They married, rebuilt their lives, and were blessed with one child, my father. My relationship with them had a strong impact on who I became. Their resilience, their faith, and their quiet strength, these were not abstract ideas to me. They were living realities that I absorbed simply by being in their presence. But nothing prepared me for what I felt when I stood in Bushdina that summer day. I walked the same streets they had once walked. I tried to imagine the life that had once filled that quiet town. Before the war, Bushdina was nearly 40% Jewish. 40%. Now there's not one Jew left. I stood there and tried to picture it, the vibrancy of Jewish life that had once pulsed through those streets. I imagine the shuls that no longer stood, the homes where Shabbos candles once flickered, the marketplaces where people greeted one another in Yiddish, the daily rhythms of Torah learning, chesed, tzedakah, chasidus, and emunah that shaped the lives of an entire community. Ordinary people living ordinary lives, and yet there was nothing ordinary about them. Their lives were infused with purpose, with faith, and with an unbreakable commitment to Yiddishkeit. As I stood there, the emotions overwhelmed me in a way I'd never experienced before. For the first time, I saw with absolute clarity that I was not simply an individual living in the present. I was a continuation, a link, a chapter in an unfolding story thousands of years old. And in that moment, I realized how deeply our children today need this awareness. They may learn Jewish history in classrooms, they study Tanakh, they memorize dates and events, they're tested on the rise and fall of our people throughout the generations. But unless we help them feel their connection to that story, unless they come to see themselves as links in an unbroken chain, that knowledge can remain distant and fragile. We, as a leaders shaping their schools and their environments, carry a sacred responsibility. We must help our students understand they're not simply individuals moving through an educational system. They are inheritors of a remarkable legacy. They come from royalty, from people who built and lost and built again, over and over and over again. A people who endured unimaginable hardship, yet never surrendered their faith, their identity, or their commitment to Torah and to Hashem. That resilience, that strength, that unwavering dedication, it's not just part of history. It lies within them. It's in their DNA. It flows in their blood. It is the inheritance passed down from generation to generation. The Sfas Emes says in the bracha of Magen Avraham in Shmona Esrei that the meaning of the words is that Hashem protects the Avram inside us. When we need resilience, strength, faith, and fortitude, we just need to access our inner Avraham. It already exists in each of us. It's in our DNA. It's a part of each and every one of us. And this too is the essence of Nishma. Yes, we need Nasa. We need the structure, the expectations, the standards that guide daily life in our schools. But we also must help our students understand the deeper context of who they are, where they come from, what came before them, and the extraordinary legacy they carry forward. When we see our students through that lens, we do more than educate them. We nourish their identity. We strengthen their sense of belonging, and we empower them to draw upon the same resilience and strength that sustained their ancestors, even if they never personally knew the Babis and Zaidis who built, lost, and rebuilt again. When a young person can understand that she's part of something eternal, she could then discover within herself a wellspring of courage, purpose, and hope that can carry her through anything. On Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we repeat the word uvechein over and over again. Uvechein tein pachtacha, uvechein tein kavod, and so on. The Torah says this word comes from the words of Esther, uvechein avo el hamelech. Esther's uvechein was with a sense of responsibility, the achrayus that motivated her to leave her comfort zone and take on the challenge of approaching the king. We learn from this the same word being used in both scenarios, that this is the same level of motivation and energy that we need to find in ourselves, to daven to the King of Kings during the Yom Noram. This is the message that we're planting into our students, to find their own miodea imlaes kazos higat al malchus moment that she will have in her own life, whether that's when she's chosen as field day captain or on a regular school day. We need to help her find her voice and actualize her potential. This is the transformative power that can happen if we cultivate the nishma in our students. As we gather here today, and you're part of this amazing conference, I want to express profound hakaras hatov to each of you. You carry an immense responsibility. You make decisions that shape lives. You hold the tension between standards and sensitivity, between structure and compassion, and between expectations and understanding. Much of what you do is unseen. Much of your effort is quiet. Much of your impact will only be visible years from now. But please know this: families depend on you, communities rely on you, and the future of our people rests in many ways in your very capable hands. What we need most from our schools and their leaders is not only excellence in na'aseh, though that is essential. We also need your commitment to nishma, to listen deeply to your students, to partner respectfully with the parents, to understand the realities of the communities that you serve, and to help each child see herself as a vital link in an unbroken chain of Jewish history. Because when you succeed in doing that, you're not just running schools. You are shaping identity and you are building continuity. You are ensuring that the eternal declaration of our people, Na'aseh v'nishma, continues to live in the hearts and souls of the next generation. And that is work of immeasurable kedusha, immeasurable impact, and immeasurable importance. As we approach Purim, I think a lot of Queen Esther, how she could have stayed silent. She could have done what was expected, quietly navigating the palace, but she listened, she observed, she understood the needs of her people and the moment she had been placed in. And then she acted with courage, wisdom, and purpose. You may not wear crowns or stand in royal courts, but you hold the keys to the futures of hundreds, even thousands of young women. You notice the hidden struggles, the unspoken questions, the silent hopes. You listen, you guide, and you act. You are shaping and molding the Esthers of our time, helping each girl see herself as part of a story far greater than she could ever imagine. And just as Esther's action saved a people, your careful attention, your listening hearts, and your unwavering dedication shapes generations. What you do, sometimes quietly and sometimes unnoticed, ripples far beyond any classroom, any test, or any report card. You're helping students understand who they are, where they come from, and the strength of the chain they belong to. So thank you. Thank you for the long hours, the difficult decisions, the tireless devotion, the listening, the guiding, the doing. Thank you for being both the voice of Na'aseh and the heart of Nishma in our schools. And may Hashem bench you with the wisdom and the vision to see nachas in the lives that you touch. Have the clarity to continue to guide them and the endless joy of knowing that your work matters today, tomorrow, and for generations to come. Thank you for listening and enjoy the rest of this amazing conference.
Would anyone like to ask any questions? Anybody would like to ask?
Yeah.
Yeah. Great.
How long are you, how long has your husband been in America?
Say
25
years. We've lived in Boca this is our 27th year in Boca. We started out in the kollel, there was a community kollel there, then we moved from that to be assistant rabbi, then moved to that to be the senior rabbi. So we've been in the rabbanus position for 25 years. Yes. Community's grown. It's boomed, yes. Yes, when we moved there, it was about 200 to 250 families, and now it's literally over 1,000 in our shul. The whole Boca extended has grown even more. It's humongous. Yeah, I mean, Boca's a place to be. You know, it's beautiful. You have sun. You have wonderful people. It's great.
So beautifully, if I may ask, I didn't get the
So the same way that we approach like Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur davening, right? That like intensity is the same way that Esther had to like prepare herself. Like the way we prepare ourselves for Yom Naram davening is the way that Esther had to prepare herself for the palace. And the idea is to teach our students the way they approach their life, the way we approach our mission is to go with that same sense of intensity, of real like mission, you know, like Ubachain, we are approaching Hashem, we are approaching the King, we are approaching our lives in a serious, yes. Pleasure. Oh, okay, we've been in touch. Thank you. He is my better half.
You mentioned a theme, which is you feel that it's important that as school leaders that we understand the parents and the communities that we serve. Do you think that there are certain themes that perhaps we should pay attention to? There's certain where there is a disconnect. You mentioned one story, and I'm wondering, are there certain themes that maybe universally, because obviously we're all serving different communities, how do you recommend that we should pay more attention to the communities?
So I think that it's important to see kind of what the minhag hamakom is, what the general population is doing, what the parents are doing. And sometimes when children learn something in their school environment, it's not practiced at home or in their communities. It's very hard for them to be excited about it, to want to take it on. You know, I'm saying, I'll give you an example. I know it's not maybe the best example because I think certain communities see this as halacha, but for many years, and maybe more, it's become like much more of a thing. But for many years, covering legs had the same idea as covering arms. It was a minhag hamakom. It wasn't required to cover legs. And in Florida, most people really haven't because it's really hot here all year, and we live in a state, and it really wasn't done. Years ago, it was not done. It's starting to catch on in more like yeshiva circles that now it's become, but it wasn't. So the girls would come home and just take their knee socks off. In fact, there was a story a bunch of years ago where there was a great family who, and many years ago, there was a decision in our community between, like, like a Beis Yaakov and a co-ed high school. Like, there was nothing in between. And it was a challenge for people deciding, because not everyone wanted the strict, but they also didn't want the other option. So there was really nothing, like, kind of in between. So there was a family who decided to send their daughter. It was a really nice, great, firm family. They didn't really fully align with the Beis Yaakov, but they also didn't want to be in the co-ed school. They decided to send their daughter to Beis Yaakov. And she really excelled. I mean, she was doing amazing. She was a great girl. And one day, the parents got a phone call from the principal that said, your daughter is doing so well. She's so amazing. We really are considering her to be the production head, but she takes her socks off when she comes home. And she doesn't wear the new socks, in the community. And for that, we can't put her in that position. It just doesn't. And, like, it was years ago. And I just remember feeling like, oh, what a shame. Like, her mother does it. Like, the community did it. Why would that be the nakuda that you're now focusing on that's going to take away, right? So you have to read what's going on at home, what's going on. And there's, unfortunately, today, there's a lot of kids who feel very disillusioned in some of the mitzvahs that are being forced on them, when it's not necessarily, like, again, we're not talking about Shabbos kosher, certain, like, but some of the chumras, or the, like, extras that have become, like, such, like, that you have to, like, know who you're dealing with and where they're coming from and who else around them is observing, and just make sure there's consistency and there's conversation and there's inspiring. Not just you have to, but this is why we feel it's important. This is why I make it a rule. Again, there have to be rules, but there also has to be an understanding. So the girls, like that Yom HaShoah story, there has to be a conversation. If you know that something that you're doing in the school is not consistent with something that they're getting at home, don't just take that like, okay, but sorry, it's our rule. Like, understand the girls are seeing these things and have to understand it at their young age and be able to, like, reconcile it. Like, how do I manage both? How am I able to, like, we're seeing a lot of rebellion in, like, old, we just actually finished Shabbat in Boca. It was amazing. And we're seeing that a lot of, I'm sure it is, and it's fine. You can attack me. I don't care. This is what we're seeing. This is what we're seeing. Or that's what you see. 100%. So it's right. Okay, that's fine. But I'm saying, why is she doing that? Why is she doing that if it's something that's done in the community? That's, what I'm saying? Like, we have to understand the why a little bit. That girl is struggling with something. Right. For sure. But what I'm saying is that the nishma and the message here is, let's understand why he says that. And she's young enough that we can have the conversation. Because once she hits 30 and she's still doing that, and that's a little bit of a trend that we're seeing, that it's hard to maintain when you don't really understand why you're being told to do things. Okay, that's exactly the point. That's exactly the point, yeah.
I want to, because I think as a Rebbitzin in a very large community, you represent a very powerful voice that I think we could all hear. And at the same time, as educators, there's a perspective where, and I don't think for me, the sock thing is not a big deal, right? But I think it represents a concept. So I want to be able to kind of play the concept.
Representation.
Kids, and we know this, research driven, they're very much influenced by their friends. So here you have a situation where the school didn't want to put the kid in a leadership position because they were worried, perhaps, that her friends would get influenced. Do you think it's possible, and this is just a question for us to even explore, that maybe she was a minority in the community?
Not then. This is like 15 years ago, 20 years ago. The school was out of touch. Yes. Or that they should have seen her where she was at. That from where she was coming from, she was doing amazing. And they couldn't even have a conversation with her. Like, what? Is there something we couldn't, this is why we think this is important. This is why we make it a rule. We'd love for, to see it continue on. There was no conversation. It was like, your daughter can't be a production head because she's not doing this. And the girl, like, didn't have a thing to do it at home. She wore, to her, it was her uniform. It wasn't like her halacha. You know what I'm saying? So it was like a very different, again, that's an example, and that was a long time ago. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. Right. know who you're dealing with, and don't just cater to certain segments, but understand the width and breadth of who is there, and know that not everyone has the same life circumstances, the same home, the same, family history, the same exposures. We're all trying to narrow everything and make them all but it's not so easy. These kids have a mind of their own, and they're seeing things and they're experiencing things, and you can't just put everyone into a box. It just doesn't work.
Even flip it to strengthen your argument. If you're able to put that girl on a pedestal and celebrate her positives, I think very often it actually is calming for all the other girls in the school to say, oh wait, she's not the picture perfect kid, and then they put her on a pedestal. And that's great. I could be on that pedestal too. And in many ways, that could be amazing too.
And it could be being on that pedestal would have made her decide that she wants to take that on and be that. But who knows? It's like that field day story. I'm saying, when you see yourself in that way, you become that person because now you want to. If that's important, it might not. She ended up switching schools after that year. By the way, she had it. She had it. The point of that phone call was she was saying, I just wish that she would go the extra mile. I wish. It was, for that girl, it was a mistake. It was just it fell on deaf ears. It fell on deaf ears. Yeah. Or just, it wasn't the point. It just wasn't what was, it just did not, there was, all right, yes.
Different perspective where we have kids that end up in our schools where the parents' values, like you said, are not aligned. And then when the parents decide to put into that school, you're saying it from a school perspective that they should have really been more understanding with the parents. But we have it a lot where we have kids in our school because we're a community school where we have to accept, and then their values are really not aligned, and they're signing all kind of tacanas and all, and in reality, the kids are coming to school.
Yeah, no. This is the age-old question. It's a very hard thing, and it just wasn't. Yeah, no. I understand this dilemma, and I'm a mother too, and I deal with that struggle of how much you want your kid to be somewhat sheltered, but at the end of the day, you can't fully shelter them. They're gonna see, they're gonna. So now you guide them and inspire them to want to be sheltered. And to, what I'm saying? Can't just come as this is the rule, this is that, and then there's no discussion. There's no, you have to understand these kids you want them to think. You want them to, so they should make these decisions a little bit, help them think of it on their own a little bit. That's not just a black and white rule, but there's a little bit of I think that's missing a little bit today. I think there are very strong, strict rules. There's very little of the children's buy-in and understanding of it.
That a kid, let's say, wants to uphold because she wants to be considered great, but really the values in the home are different, and then there's a lot of confusion.
Yeah, no, I know. There are schools that are doing different classes, different levels of observance. They're trying to figure that out. It's very hard. But like I said, there are some that accomplish it, and I think it's so much is about the home. You just see that there are certain homes that are able to accomplish this, and so if you really, really stick to it, and you hopefully can inspire your child at home.
Thank you.
I cannot look at Reverend
Zena,
Goldberg.
took away the job from the father.
Grandfather.
It's a Sephardic law school.
I was wondering if you could
I'm also, my legal
share
name is Goldberg.
just one story, and
Jenny
I think the women need to understand. It's so fascinating because
And
when you
Shauna
see
and
what a
Tana now.
parent is really like
Tana
in the most difficult times, and they held on so, what was it that gave them that value? I think that's what
So
we're
Tana
trying to unearth and
Tana,
figure
high
out
school
for
and
ourselves, right?
So it's actually I'm actually writing an article about this because I was very zocha to be a grandchild of Holocaust survivors. All four of my grandparents were European. 3 of them survived the Holocaust. They didn't talk about it so much, which is part of my article that I'm writing that hopefully will come out at some point soon. But it was really very much there. They on purpose didn't talk about it because they wanted very much to protect us and that we shouldn't have struggles and be burdened by their stories. And certainly my father, really didn't know anything, and he still struggles with that because there are a lot of holes in their stories. But we saw in them, because we, a little later on, we started getting bits and pieces, and we knew they were different. We knew they went through something, and then we started learning about it and making, connecting the dots and figuring it out. And my grandparents were really like, I have to say, from my childhood, like they had the biggest influence on me. Like I saw in them this like ability to just move forward and to be able to like, whatever was in the past, they had to be able to move on. There's a video, I don't know, Rabbi Gold did a video about my grandfather, that he, it's really it's a crazy story about just being able to move forward and forgive. He never really forgave, but he was able to move forward. That's really the point of the story. And my husband has used it in like Yom Kippur speeches and Tisha B'Av, and there are a lot of lessons to learn from the story. But he like I said in the speech, he was married before the war. He had a child, and he had in-laws, and he had siblings, and lived in his own. He lived in Seagate then, and he was able to get papers to be able to leave the country, be able to go to like the safer side of Romania. He had this one very, very close friend. He was like his confidant, his chavrusa. They learned together, they spent time together, and they were discussing one day, like, what are you doing? We all knew that like it was coming to this was the end already. This was the last year of the war. It was spring of 1944. So they knew that things were brewing, and they saw what was going on. They heard about it, and they knew they had to do something. So he was actually able to get visas to be able to be taken to the safe side for him, for his wife and child, for his in-laws, and he was going to leave like in a couple of days. He was just getting all of his stuff together and like getting everyone ready, and he told this friend, so what are you doing? He said, well, I actually have these papers. I'm about to leave, and the friend, they shared this like, I don't know, this like vault, this like hiding place where they kept important papers. I don't know exactly that, like they had this like shared hiding spot. And he told his friend, my papers are all there, we're ready to go, we're gonna be leaving in a couple days. And when he went to find his papers, before he was about to leave, they were gone. The only person who knew about that hiding spot was this friend, and he had heard that the friend was able to escape to that safe side with his family. So I was in camp one summer. I don't know if any of you have seen this video, but I was in camp, and my grandparents, my father was the only child, so they came to everything. They were at every graduation, every simcha, every visiting day. Torturous. My grandparents came to every visiting day. And my father and my grandfather were walking the path, and my father, who knew everyone that my grandfather knew because he was their only son and knew all their friends and acquaintances, and there was this old man who walked by, and like they kind of nodded at each other. And my father said to my grandfather, who is this man? Never seen him before, I don't know him. And my grandfather said, let's just keep going. Don't worry about it, I don't want to talk about it. My father, of course, is like very inquisitive. He's like, I need to know who this guy is, clearly means something to you. I'd like to know the story. So my grandfather said to him, he was my best friend before the war. My father was like, let's go back. I want to meet him. Your friend before the war. He didn't really know anything from his life before the war. And my grandfather said, let's just keep walking. Let's go. My father pushed, and he finally said to him the story of what happened. And, it was at that point. And it's what's crazy about this story, which is really a little bit my point, is my father didn't even tell that story to us. And we never heard that story until years later. My grandfather already passed away. My parents were visiting us in Boca. And we're sitting at the Shabbos table, and something came up. And my father said, that reminded me of that time that I was in visiting day in Chedva, and we passed by that old friend of Zaidi's. And my husband and I looked at each other, and we're like, oh my gosh, that's really a crazy story. And we're like, Abba, that's really a crazy story. And he's like, this was just normal for this generation. And since then, we've heard a few more stories like that of people who just were able to mivate, or able to not press charges or go after someone or carry a grudge, or there's so many, because that generation just felt like what happened was in the past, there were 6 million things they would have changed and done differently and wished and hoped and whatever. And if they had to be able to move on with life, they had to be able to put that in their past, or else they couldn't move on. And I think that's what I picked up on from my grandparents, just the fact that they built a life. And I mean, my grandmother described that she lived in the most beautiful home with, they had all these housekeepers and chandeliers. I mean, she was Hungarian, and it was gorgeous. They had everything. And then they, lost it all. And she was living in a tiny apartment in Queens, and they were so happy. They saved every crumb, and they appreciated everything. And, we saw those different, but, and then after my father told the story, we ended up, Rabbi Krohn was coming in to do a bris. We told Rabbi Krohn, he put it in his book, and then, and then it spread. Rabbi Yocheved did a video. But since then, it's been a mission of mine to tell a lot of my grandparents' stories. So I've written about my grandmother. I've written about another story about my grandfather. We have 6 daughters and a son, Kanai Nahara, and my son just had his bar mitzvah. He's the last one. So whatever. It's also a story about how we found this story about my grandparents. We recorded them in 1999 in Boca when we moved in. And I was watching the video because I was writing an article about my trip this past summer to Bushtana. And I came across, it was like out of nowhere. I was looking at the genealogy trying to find some like yichus that he had mentioned. And then he's like, this reminds me of what happened to me in Auschwitz when we got there. And I'm like, I'm literally cooking for like, the bar mitzvah. And I'm like, oh, a story from Auschwitz. I don't remember. This is from so many years ago. Am I running out of time? I should keep going. And this was when I wanted to speak at one of the meals for my son's bar mitzvah. I was really excited to like share. I mean, it was like our first and only bar mitzvah. And my grandfather tells a story about when he was deported. And it was like towards the end of the war. So what used to be that they were telling all the Jews, like, take everything you have. Now it was like, don't take anything. You're not allowed to take anything. They just like pushed onto the trains. That was it. And he gets to Auschwitz and he's separated to work. He goes to the shower barrack and everyone's told to undress. And this is like after, days of traveling and everyone's, and you're not allowed to have anything on you. So everyone's getting undressed for the showers, and all of a sudden my grandfather sees that like one by one tefillin fall down. Like they're getting undressed, and every man has smuggled in their tefillin. That's all they took. They didn't take papers, they didn't take pictures, they didn't take the jewelry and the diamonds. It was tefillin just kept, he's like, I'll never forget the tefillin just dropping on the floor. And then they were told to shower, they came back, and there was, these Polish prisoners were sweeping up the tefillin. There were like this huge mountain pile of tefillin just sitting there. And he was just like kind of like had a faraway look, like, yeah, that's and I listened, like, oh my gosh, this is like the lesson for my son's bar mitzvah, like nothing else matters except what we hold so dear, our tradition, our masorah, our lifeline, the tefillin, and so that was my my speech to him for his bar mitzvah using that story, but the whole timing of everything. And yeah, so I'm saying I encourage all of you. I'm sure many of you have, because if our generation, they're not going to know Holocaust survivors like we did. They will know what happened in Israel, which is really important to tell them those stories, because it was really, some of the stories that are come out of Eretz Israel are beyond comprehension. The things that people have done, the heroism. We actually had 2 hostages who spoke this week. It's just their emunah and their bitachon and the things that they found in those tunnels, the emunah and the strength, it's beyond. So our kids can access this and hear about that right now. I think it's important. But I think it's also important to bring them our past and make sure they know our grandparents, our parents, our great-grandparents. They should know our stories. They should know where they come from. And it's our job to do that, because I think a lot of who we are is because we lived with that and knew them and had that experience with them. But our kids won't. And they don't have the same resilience and the same strength that a lot of us do, because this is a very anxiety-ridden, generation. And I think they need to know that it's in their DNA, and they could, tap into all of that inner strength. They have it. We need to be the ones to show them. And I think we could do that in schools, in our homes. It really should be a goal. I think that's very important. All right, thank you, everyone. Overstayed my welcome.